This is the Everything Financial Radio Show. I am your host, Dennis Tubbergen, and you are listening to the Legacy Radio Network. Thanks for joining me today. Boy, a lot to talk about. Back on the show today, special guest, Mr. Ian Gordon. Ian is president and founder of the Longwave Group. We're going to get his take on the economic winter cycle in which we find ourselves. We're going to talk to him about money printing and the effect that it will have, in his opinion, on the world financial system. We'll also get his take on where gold is headed. So a lot to talk to Mr. Gordon about today. Looking forward to having him join us momentarily. Also on today's show, has the housing market finally bottomed? News this week that may be optimistic, or is it optimistic? We'll talk about it. Japan has a trade deficit. You've got to be kidding me. First time since 1989, Japan has a trade deficit. They also have a massive amount of government debt, almost twice the debt of the United States when you measure it in terms of their economy. What will that trade deficit do to their ability to service that debt? And will this simply add to the world's debt woes in addition to what's going on in Europe? Also, we'll talk in that same vein about some ugly debt outcomes. We'll be talking about a recent Gallup poll that may tell us where the unemployment numbers will be when they're released here in a little more than a week or so. And we'll also talk about an interview done by Dr. Chris Martenson, who's been a guest on the Everything Financial Radio Show, with James Dines, who's a publisher of a newsletter that I have read for many years called the Dines Letter. Mr. Dines is of the opinion that the politicians are spending money they know they will never pay back, and by the time the consequences rear their ugly head, he says that he hopes they'll be safely dead. So we'll listen to a little bit or talk a little bit about his interview as well. Quick reminder, we do have yet available for our listeners a 2012 Market and Economic Outlook Home Study Kit. If you've not yet gotten this home study kit, you can go to investingapproach.com and get it. In the kit, you'll receive our 2012 Market and Economic Outlook Report. You'll receive a CD containing an interview with a gentleman that's going to appear on the show here very, very shortly, Mr. Ian Gordon, and also a copy of the book, Economic Consequences. I released the book last April. Can you survive, even prosper, from the results of 100 years of bad money decisions? Also, if you've not attended a 2012 Discovery Group, you can go to personallegacyseminars.com, and you will see that we will be out in Alto at the Saskatoon Golf Club on March the 8th. We'll be at the AMG Business Center on March the 13th. That's over in Norton Shores in the Muskegon, Michigan area, and at Boulder Creek Golf Club in Belmont. That's on Thursday, March the 15th. Again, personallegacyseminars.com to get more information on the discovery groups. We will discuss in depth why we believe the current economic winter season in which we find ourselves was entirely predictable. We're going to talk with Mr. Ian Gordon about that here momentarily as well. We'll talk about why we believe that most of the economic growth of the past 30 years may have been an illusion and what the consequences will be for you and your money. Again, information there at personallegacyseminars.com. I am privileged to have back on the Everything Financial Radio Show with me again a somewhat regular guest, Mr. Ian Gordon of the Longwave Group, and we'll certainly tell you how to learn more about Mr. Gordon's work as well. Ian, thanks so much for joining us again today.
Well, as always, Dennis, thank you for having me.
Well, Ian, a lot going on around the world, and certainly with as we record this, gas prices being in the headlines and talk of more money printing at the Federal Reserve in the United States, and certainly money printing having taken place all around the world. When you look at the balance sheets of all the largest central banks, they've all expanded. Give us your take on. I know you've been a deflationist, given the context of the economic winter cycle in which we find ourselves. Give us your take on what's going on and how all this plays out as far as inflation and deflation from your perspective.
Well, I still adhere to the idea that we're far more likely to see deflation than we are inflation. And the reason for that is it's the unwinding of the debt. So as fast as they're trying to create money, money is being basically taken out of the economy as as the economies start to die. I mean, you can see that really happening in just about any country in the world. I mean, debt is being wrung out of the system, and that debt is massive worldwide, and that's basically the whole purpose of a long wave winter is to eradicate the debt. And we're looking at something better than $100 trillion of debt worldwide, and most of that is going to be washed out. So it's almost impossible for the central banks to compete with the money coming out by printing more and more money to try and overwhelm that sort of debt collapse that's ongoing around the world.
Ian, for our listeners that maybe went to the gas station this past week and put fuel in their cars and saw gas prices going up, in your opinion, to what extent is that maybe attributable to past money printing that the Federal Reserve has done, and to what, in your mind, might that be attributable to other factors?
Well, I don't really think it's attributable too much to the money printing. I think really, I think there's a certain amount of speculation in that. So yes, I suppose indirectly we could say the money printing is creating the speculation, so that the Federal Reserve is pushing money into the banks, and so you get the speculation in just about anything. You get it in the stock market, you get it even in gasoline prices and so on. So, and the other thing I think is, there's still the geopolitical situation is pretty unsettled right now with Iran and Syria. So, and Iran threatening to close the Straits of Hormuz, and where a lot of the world's oil has to go through that strait. So I think that uncertainty also is contributing to higher gas prices.
So, Ian, give us your take, given that here in the United States, and I think you do spend some time in the States in the winter months, given that it is an election season, in fact, as we are recording this, there's just been a presidential debate taking place in the Republican Party. Given an election year, given the political pressures to probably keep the stock market propped up, try to keep the economy moving to the extent that you can through the end of the year if you're a politician or a policymaker, what are the probabilities in your mind that we'll see quantitative easing 3 or more money printing by the Federal Reserve before the year's out?
Well, I think we're seeing that already, Dennis. I mean, the Fed is going sort of gangbusters in sort of trying to keep the whole thing afloat, as are the central banks around the world. I mean, the European Central Bank is doing the same thing. The Bank of England is doing the same thing. So everybody, but it seems to me that it's almost all the central banks are running on a treadmill that's getting faster and faster, and eventually the whole system, I think, is going to collapse. I mean, really, what we're seeing, and I think I've made this point before, is essentially the collapse of paper money that's occurring worldwide, and we're seeing the evidence of that most clearly in what's happening in Europe, and particularly what's happening in Greece. So they're trying to prop up Greece by creating even more paper money, but most of that money actually isn't going to Greece. I think there's only about 18% of the latest bailout is earmarked for Greece itself. The rest is basically going to pay off the banks that have all the Greek paper on their books. So I'm convinced that the entire paper money system worldwide is in the throes of a collapse right now.
If you're just joining us, this is the Everything Financial Radio Show. We're chatting with Mr. Ian Gordon of the Longwave Group. And Ian, we're coming up on a break here in about a minute and a half or so maybe we can start asking or answering this question before the break, and then after the break we'll pick it up again. But given that it's your view that we're seeing paper money collapse. Obviously, printing money devalues money. What's the end game? I mean, as far as maybe just talk a little bit about, in your view, time frames. Obviously, that's got to be good for metals.
Well, very good for the precious metals, yes. And we're seeing that, gold is rising quite dramatically, as is silver, because people go to those metals because they trust them, and they just don't trust paper anymore. I mean, can you imagine you're living in Greece and you've got your money in a Greek bank? I mean, if you're smart, you're going to take it out, and a lot of it, you're going to convert probably into precious metals, because that's the money that you can trust. I mean, the precious metals are, if Greece has to go back to a drachma, it's going to be, essentially a minute value of the euro, and so people, I think, will convert into precious metals as they have been doing, all around the world. And that's why we're seeing the precious metals prices rise. I mean, there's only so much gold and silver available in the world, but there's an awful lot of paper money available everywhere.
Well, we are chatting with Ian Gordon. We will pick up our conversation with him after the break when Everything Financial Radio returns. Stay with us.